Let me hit this. We're recording. I guess my first question for you is that you've been a bit of a trailblazer, and the hardest question to ask is also the easiest question to answer, and that is being a woman in a man's world. And I say that because we've done a number of women lately from the area as well as the rest of it. Is being a woman in a man's world, is it something that was in your brain that you knew you had to sort of roll uphill, or did you just let your talents speak for themselves?
Well, since I'm talking to people from Detroit, I'm going to be totally truthful. Being a woman in a man's world at age 15 is a whole lot of fun. So I was able to sail with, you say you're from Crescent, Ron Sherry, Case DeLang, Ken Swetka, there was a Stu Argo, the Hollerbox, Nutter, Grizz. There's a whole lot of fun going on. I am pretty sure that anytime somebody tried to say that I could not do something because I was a female, I basically put it right back at them and said, yeah, watch me.
You also had a track career. You threw the shot, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct?
I threw shot put and discus. I used to complain that we were like against Romeo Plank. So the girls that were throwing hay bales were much better at shot put. I was a lowly sailor, so I was better at the discus.
And I guess the last question before we get into the actual interview, I think innovator is a word that might fit with your background and certainly with your bio, because you've done a lot of things a lot of things new that at the time weren't really thought about. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and we continue to do that at Oakcliff.
We're talking with Dawn Riley, who is a L'Anse Creuse high school graduate here and a former Michigan State sailor and probably one of the best women sailors that this country's ever produced. America's Cup, Whitbread, I could go on and on. And I guess the easiest place to start with these interviews is that I know you're North Star. That's where you sort of started. Mm-hmm. Maybe talk a little bit about your juniors and how you got involved. Mom and Dad probably sailed, and then kind of take us through the college years.
So first of all, we grew up in St. Clair Shores and then in Harrison Township, and we sailed as a family, but we lived on the boat when we were cruising. When I was 13, we went from Detroit, Barge Canal, to New York, up to Maine, Florida, the Bahamas, and back. So I wouldn't call my parents hippies, but I think the rest of the world probably did back then. So we were definitely not traditional yacht club. There was very little junior sailing. I think you're probably as old as I am, and there was very little junior sailing organized at any club. North Star Sail Club, there was a group that came from the East Coast and heard about this thing called Sea Scouts. So we were Ship 147, and that is something that, there's a lot that formulates your years as you go forward. But one of the things that has infiltrated everything I've done in terms of the coaching, nonprofit work, the leadership, is making sure that the individuals who you're coaching are given every opportunity to figure it out for themselves. And the Sea Scouts was basically the adults were there to make sure we didn't kill anybody, including ourselves. And then we got to go sailing.
The Sea Scouts are actually based now at Crescent. Don't come full circle. So that's kind of where did the racing start? And you raced in college, I'm assuming, at Michigan State.
Yeah, so I think the racing started with my great-grandfather Cedar was a racer. So my grandmother was a racer, my father was a racer, and if we were cruising, we were racing. So we were the only kids that were begging to do our homework, and my dad was yelling at us, "Stop whining, trim the spinnaker." And we're like, "It's red, it's dark, it's Sunday, it's 9:30 at night, I want to go to sleep." And he would refuse to turn the engine on. So I was beaten into becoming a racer. And then when I was 13, it was extremely empowering to go sailing with individuals that were way older than me, and yet I knew what I was doing. So I did not do the traditional way.
Beaten in a metaphorical term, right?
Yeah, most times.
Did Dad's obsession, is that a fair way of putting it? Was Dad's obsession, is that something, obviously you must have it because you've spent a lifetime doing not too much different than what Mom and Dad did.
Yeah. I've traveled a lot. Michigan State, and funny story there is, as only you can be, is you have to be pretty confident at some moments in time to be able to achieve, even if it's without any factual backup for it at all. So I called the coach at Michigan State, and I think his name was Sid. I was like, I am coming to Michigan State for the education, not for the sailing team, because at that point Michigan was better. And I said, just because I'm a girl does not mean I'm going to be a crew. I'm going to be a skipper. And I was very forthright. And he said, great. What I didn't know is he was like, yay, we have a sailor, any kind of a sailor. And the story continues, because the first practice, I T-boned the race committee boat, which he was in an FJ, and it was an aluminum fishing boat. So it made quite a noise.
Where did the confidence from then and where the confidence now, where does that come from?
I think it's from doing and achieving. I mean, I can think back to wanted to carry 5-gallon jugs of water up the basement stairs, and I did. It took me 20 minutes.
But to get into calling a coach at the collegiate level and saying, by the way, I'm coming, and here comes this hurricane, that at some point there has to be some accomplishment to go along with the confidence.
Nobody's ever called me a hurricane before. But I mean, just again, moments in time. I was running Piet Hein, Choke 40, and we were in Chicago, and I was 15, and I was at the outside patio, and there was the god of sailing to me, Lowell North there. And I walked up and I said, hi, Mr. North, I'm Dawn Riley. He goes, I know who you are. And I was like, holy crap, he does? Now, in hindsight, we were one of the coolest boats on the lake, and we had North sails. So yeah, maybe he did know. Or we had North sails some. We had also some hood. But the funny story there is he asked me, without knowing that I was 15, I'm going to the bar, would you like a drink? And I literally read a novel, and it was like a Southern Belle novel. And I said, oh, I'll just have what you're having. So thus my first gin and tonic at age 15. You don't get to do that nowadays.
Do you remember, and this has sort of been a staple, do you remember a point in your life when sailing didn't become just something you did, but it was sort of like you knew this was what you wanted to do for a career? Was there ever that point in your mind?
Multiple times. When I was 13, when we were in Newport and I saw the America's Cup and almost got run off the pier by Ted Turner and his entourage from the TV cruise. When I first saw the Whipred film at North Star Sail Club and said, I'm going to do that. Back up when I saw the Olympics, when they did the Fosbury Flop when I was in 4th grade, and I met Sheila Young, who was a speed skater, and she'd gone to the Olympics, and I found out sailing was in the Olympics. And it all just keeps going in circles, because Sheila Young, turns out, was a founder and friend of Billie Jean King of the Women's Sports Foundation. And then, 40 years later, I was president of the Women's Sports Foundation.
I actually had a chance to meet her. She was in Lake Placid in 1980. I lived in Lake Placid. But when you say the Fosbury Flop, to talk about memories, Dick Fosbury was the first guy, just a reference point. Dick was the first guy to ever go over the high jump backwards. And at the time, everybody thought he was nuts, but it turned out to be that was the revolutionary aspect of the sport, because that's the way everybody's been jumping ever since.
And we built high jump bars in our backyards.
Yeah, no, that's what you did. One of the things about this series that's been interesting is learning about a lot of talent that's in the lake, and I say the lake being St. Clair. And I again, one more staple question before we actually get into the entire interview. I'm not sure that we recognize, and I say we, the sailing community, and Lake St. Clair, and for that matter, the Great Lakes, but certainly Detroit, I'm not sure we recognize how much talent is really here. Now, you've been around the rest of the country. I think we compare pretty well to a lot of the hot spots. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. But what makes the Midwest in general, and Lake St. Clair in particular, so special is that people aren't overly confident, and they're always trying to figure out a better way, a way to improve. They never just sit there and say, hey, we're great. So yeah, you look at like the names that I just mentioned that I sailed with, those are really, really, really good sailors. You know, Tim Woodhouse was a great friend of mine. He was the first person that took me out to be a pro, again, around that 15, 16-year-old, who, what my mother was thinking, letting me get on a plane with a bunch of salty sailors to go to Manhasset Bay and trim Maine for Clune Walsh's Lunatic back then. Katie Pettibone, Merritt and Justin Palm. There's some really, really good sailors that are out on the race course. Buddy Melgis, can't forget, you know, all of the Wisconsin. Here at Oakcliff, we have a huge amount of Wisconsin people, to the point that when they might be speeding in the mooring field, I get a call from the local Bay Constable Water Police. They're like, how many people from Wisconsin do you people have over there? But they're all good people, excellent sailors, lots of talent. And, you know, the names can just go on and on and on.
Was the first big break for you the Whitbread with Tracy Edwards? Is that kind of the first step? Because the Whitbread obviously is if you're not sure, the Volvo around the world, but it was certainly a huge race. And was that maybe the first large race, international race for you?
That was the first international, but like I went to interview for Maiden, and I was sailing on Bill Koch's Matador in St. Thomas. So I was sailing on the Maxis. I was teed up to do shore crew for the Royal 1000. So I was already kind of dipping my toe here and there, but Maiden was the first one. And it's kind of funny. It was just like, okay, I'm going to go sail around the world. My mom said, that's nice, dear. Call me when you're done, type thing. It was pretty casual. And it did not, I mean, I know the movie's out and it makes it look like it was this huge thing. It was huge in England and other parts of the world. Really, the America's Cup 92, 95 that coupled with the Atlanta Olympics and the Silver Bullets, those were the big, you know, game changers in America, American sailing, and specifically women in American sailing.
Would you learn to sail around the world? Were there different, we've seen all of these videos from everybody flying in different places, and was there a learning process of realizing that there's all kinds of conditions on this planet and in the water?
No. Great Lakes, you got them all. I've got my first hypothermia Mackinac race, no wind, flies, bugs, thunderstorms. You're going upwind 20 feet away, somebody's going downwind, and you're pointed in the same direction. No, the Great Lakes, that's one of the great proving grounds to teach you how to sail everywhere. The only thing that you get better at going around the world is you do it a lot longer, and there's more fun surfing.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You had your choice, salt or fresh water if you're sailing?
Fresh.
For the obvious reason.
But I will still be the sucker that on the rail comes back, does a Mackinac, and a wave comes over, and I duck, and everybody else is like, what's the problem?
Did you think about, first of all, you're making a living at this point as a sailor, am I correct?
Yep, I have been.
At what point in your process do you realize you can make a living at this? And then I'm sure at some point made an idea that you could make a really good living. And I asked the question because why not be a professional racer, sail racer, if that's something you want to do? And I think we've had a number of kids in our junior program who actually have had that conversation with us. So first of all, just sort of talk to that a little bit.
So I was a boat captain in Piet Hein because I was the only one without a real job, and I needed a job. So basically I got paid room and board and a little bit of spending money. And then I became a boat captain, and then I put myself through college. So that's when I realized that I could make real money. I worked at Hardee's for 1 month and then took a pay cut to go work at North Sails. So I realized that there was jobs in and around the marine industry. I mean, I worked for Hugh Ruggiero at Burr Yachts, taking mast in and out and doing electronics. So I realized pretty early on the career part was the difference, because back then being a pro sailor wasn't really a thing. And certainly it wasn't for females. So I was actually And that's kind of what we're doing here at Oakcliff right now with COVID. I pivoted. It was the recession. It was 1986, 87, 88. That was when there was no money, there were no jobs, and yet there was an owner that needed his boat taken care of. So that's really what teed me up. I went south. I was working on boats, doing my job, delivering, making decent money, and then Maiden came along. And that's when I realized that maybe I wasn't going back into getting a job in advertising or, being a landscape architect or flipping houses or dancing on tables or whatever it was I thought I was going to do.
Were you good at working at Wendy's or Hardee's?
Oh God, it was the worst thing ever.
And the
They
reason I'm asking,
ridiculed me because I was wearing Sperry topsiders. They were my old shitty shoes. You had to wear brown shoes, and they're like, "Oh, you're snotty because you're wearing topsiders."
I asked the question of my second career as a coach, and I get paid, and I get to do lots of things, and my family still thinks of it as a hobby. And, it's not a hobby; it's a full-time job. So when I'm doing things, well, you're on, Sunday afternoons, I'm working and you're out, enjoying yourself with everybody else. I think that's somewhat true. And the reason I'm asking the question about the hamburger joint was that I'm guessing you're probably a little bit compulsive, obsessive in the fact that you want to do everything at full speed. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. It was extremely frustrating watching. Yeah.
If you're not doing something you love, you don't do it.
Yes. And I didn't mind the work. And of course I wanted to improve the flavor of the hamburgers. Don't trust the au jus. It's basically just warm, salty water to store the hamburgers in. Sorry, Hardee's. They're not going to sponsor me ever.
Right. Now from Whitbread, 92, I think, you get picked up by Bill Koch to be a pit, and I'm going to say this right, pit woman, not necessarily a pit man.
We call it, well, times have changed. Billie Jean King schooled me a little bit. I used to sign my signature pit chick, which is not okay.
No.
But with the women's team, so it was 1992 was the America's Cup, where it was it's technically a co-ed team, but it was all male plus me. And then 1995 was the all women's America's Cup, where you have Katie and Debbie Pettibone and Merritt Palm and a lot of other women from the Great Lakes.
But the 92, you were the only female on that crew, am I correct?
92, yes.
Kind of experience was that?
It was fun. Just to clarify the definition, we decided as a team that we were, as a pit, you could say pit person, but it was a pitman, as a bowman, as a massman, and it was gender neutral just because it said man. It wasn't like man. So 1992, are you kidding me? We built 5 boats. I was the rookie. I was just come back from, sailing around the world. I was super fit, super strong. I was the only one. I had my own locker room. On that side, on the sailing was amazing. The innovation, we would change bulbs overnight. We did so much technological innovation and crazy stuff that nowadays is like amateur. Like we wanted to get a visual of the airflow with the different shapes of the jibs. So the boffins and the scientists filled up. One day we came down and the whole interior of the boat was filled with balloons, blue and yellow balloons with helium. And they had rented a helicopter, and we went out sailing. And when they called us on the radio, we opened the hatches and deployed the balloons so they could see how the balloons went off. This is before CFD. This is before CGI. So we were sending balloons up, and now we see environmental. Oh my God, what we were thinking. But just the not so crazy out of the box thinking was amazing on that team.
Bill Koch was kind of, I don't want to say tyrant, but he's got this reputation a bit of being kind of a tough skipper.
He's a unique individual. I think people like Dennis Conner have a reputation of being a tough skipper and, differing levels of human beings. Bill Koch was unique. He was in a weird situation because he had learned sailing later.
Right.
He had been glommed onto by a bevy of professional sailors. Some of them had more interest in their own career, and some had more interest in his enjoyment of this experience. And to differing degrees, it all worked out in the wash. But also for him, it was a place of insecurity to, are they my friend and are we having fun because I'm really cool and I'm getting better? Or are they there because they need my money? And if you know who was the co-skipper at the end, the good human being buddy Mel just won out.
Was he, or for that matter, Buddy, were they equal opportunity teachers? Did they treat you the same as the male crew?
I think other than the fact that I was paid like 50% or less than the male teammates, they got me as cheap as they possibly could. Other than that, more or less, yeah. Buddy was super, I just read an article in Seahorse actually, and it talks about the fact that he's a teacher, he's a coach. Anybody who loves sailing, he'll talk to you for hours until he at 80 whatever will exhaust you.
We have an invitation the second weekend in October to go over to Wisconsin and sit down with him. And I've been after that interview for probably, 3 months. And I've talked to his son. We just had a Melgis 24 national championship race here at Crescent. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of folks that were involved with the company, and I've been trying. And the stories that we've had, we've been fortunate to have the Connors, and you had a nice thing about Dennis. I could tell you some other stories, and they don't matter, but the reality to it is that he's just a first class guy. I mean, it'd be interesting to sit down and have that conversation.
Yeah.
From going from Bill Koch, obviously you go to America Cubed. Now that's a whole nother experience because now you've got an entire female crew. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, is that not the first time at that level having an all female crew?
Well, yeah. And in '92, I was the first one with an active role on the team. There were a couple of women before me, including, Gloria Vanderbilt way back, but a physical role like grinding and pulling and, right there, shoulder to shoulder. That was the first time. Ironically, the women's team was when I felt discriminated against because they determined that all the coaches were male because I was on the sailing team. So, and it was kind of natural, but it created an artificial divide that then was replicated at SCA. It was replicated with EF language and around the world in Amherst Sport, where the men were in charge and the women were there for the publicity. That was a problem. You need women in leadership in any corporation. If I go out and speak, motivational speaking, women's groups, men's groups, businesses, the answer is that you need to have representation, racial and gender diversity at the table making the decisions. Otherwise, there's inadvertent discriminatory decisions made. And not because anybody is being evil or mean or, pointed, just because the point of view isn't represented and you can't make a legitimate decision.
I think it's a great point. One of the things, I'm involved in a couple of other sports as a coach. And the nice thing about sports is it sort of equals the playing field. Either you can or you can't. There's not a lot of, if you can't do the job, then it is what it is. Sailing, and I think that's one of the conversations we've had. One of the reasons I'm having a conversation with you is, obviously you're one of the best one of the best female sailors ever. But a couple of weeks ago, one of our members came up. In fact, Connections, some people said that I must be a chauvinist because I haven't interviewed any women. Well, I don't have a lot of background in knowing a lot of racers. And the last 5 interviews we've done now have been female racers with great experience from both a local level to being the pinnacle and talking with you. I still think sailing happens to be a bit of a sort of old man, white man sport, which I am. And you can see it in a variety of ways. And right. It's been an uphill slide. And I'm not trying to editorialize, but having had a mother who went through, law school when I was, 10, 11, I understand that better than most because I had a mother who was a professional growing up. So I had a different view of the world. So appreciation.
It's also in terms of accelerating that, you have to have people in leadership. The talent is out there, and if the challenge is how do you tip the scales? How do you get the women in leadership? And the answer is that whoever is in charge has to make a concerted effort to ask 3 times more and louder and harder, because if a female, especially talking middle school, young athlete, if they don't see themselves, and we haven't even barely begun talking about diversity. If they don't see somebody that looks like them and sounds like them in leadership, they don't envision and imagine that, unless they're an unusual, freak of nature, like maybe I was.
I actually have a piece of paper. It hangs in my office, and it was the job description for being a prosecuting attorney in a local county. And they had an entry-level price for males, and they had an entry-level price for females. And by today's standards, it would be illegal.
Illegal.
But it turns out that it was out of about a $23,000 starting salary at the time. Women started at $18,700. And I keep that up in my office because it's like somebody will say to me, well, there's no real tangible evidence that women make less than men. And I said, well, no, actually, I have some tangible evidence.
Well, I do. 1992, I was paid half what other guys were making. And the answer was, when I found out, because somebody's paycheck got stuck to mine, they said, well, you don't have children or a husband. You're not a breadwinner. I was like, oh, dear God. So then when I was in charge and a guy came up to me and said, well, you see, I need to have more money because I have 5 children, I could legitimately look at him and say, just because you and your wife like having sex and procreating doesn't make you a better sailor. I'm going to pay you what I'm going to pay you because that is what you are, as a sailor.
Absolutely. Where does Dave Dellenbaugh fit into the America Cube story? Now, he came on late, I think,
came on as a tactician. So all of the pundits said, you're not going to be strong enough. Women aren't going to be strong enough. We were plenty strong. We could out-tack Dennis Conner and his team of amazing sailors and grinders. We'd get sails up and down. What we didn't have is, other than myself, anybody else who had been in an America's Cup match racing on those boats. So we were just lacking in deep depth of experience. And we just ran out of time. So that's where we moved Dave on. In the tactician role, everybody thinks the helmsperson is the star, right? Or the owner's the star. It's really the tactician, because the tactician not only needs to know what's going to happen, they need to figure out what your move is, and then they have to communicate it to the person with enough time to execute. So they really have to be somewhat psychic and have a depth of experience, and that's what Dave brought to the team.
We talked to Dave about 2 months ago, and he could not have been more complimentary about the crew and just the general process. And one of the things, if you know anything about Dave, you know that he's got a very he would have been an elementary school teacher by trade. And so I think sometimes you think about the pick, right time, certainly the experience he brought to the table. But he was so complimentary about the sailing skills. Not that he shouldn't have been, but he was very clear that there's very few men crews that he ever said that were any better. And I think that's a testament to, picking the right folks and giving them the opportunity. But, it's just one of those things that happens. What did you learn from being sort of the CEO of that entire syndicate?
That syndicate, I was just the team captain. I was CEO of America True, which was the 2000 campaign.
Okay.
That's the one where I learned more and more and more about management. And I think that probably managing herds of sailors is one of the most difficult things in the world, because everybody's passionate. Everybody wants to work hard. But on any given day, somebody has worked past their point of no return, and you get grumpy, you get stressed, you get passion. We literally had a sign on our office wall at America True: this place is built on passion, expect fireworks, because it's and everybody, it's so exciting, it's so high pressure. Every America's Cup campaign is a startup. You're trying to put together a business, to invent the widget. The difference is that there's 8 to 10 other teams trying to do exactly the same thing.
Talk a little bit about America True and how it got started and how it functioned.
So America True was a little bit my frustration with not having women in the leadership of America Cubed in 95. And about, 3 weeks before the end, I went to a few people and said, I'm going to do my own America's Cup. Are you with me? And honestly, most people said no. They were like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get a real job. So I put together my marketing plan and got a yacht club and did all the things. And then it was time to put in the entry fee, and I didn't have enough money. The entry fee then was $100,000, but I did have a Visa card that I had gotten in college at Michigan State, and I had paid off every month. So I had $50,000 worth of credit, which I used all of it to get a cash advance to send half of the entry fee. And then I had somebody else vouch for the other half to New Zealand to enter the America's Cup.
That's a lot of simoleons to take that kind of risk. You believe that much in it? Is that a fair statement?
I believe that much in it. I was doing that. It was full force ahead. And one of the things that had us, and this is what's really important. So many times people say, oh, no, I need to make money, or no, it's only about the economy, or it's only about winning. No, it's about the big picture. And here at Oakcliff Sailing, we talk that we are building American leaders through sailing. Sailing's a secondary part of it. So with America True, we were trying to be the diverse team. We knew we were going to be co-ed. We wanted to represent America truly, and part of that was increasing the exposure to underserved, or at that point, it was called at-risk kids. So we did 28 yacht clubs that started true youth programs, reaching out into the community, finding kids who had never been on the water, and that was their deal with us. We said, we will carry your battle, your burgee into battle. We will come and do social events at your place. We'll do coaching. We only ask that you consider contributing to us financially, but you absolutely must do a true youth event where you reach out into the community and get more kids sailing. That's it.
When you take this huge financial risk, you had been around a lot of very successful sailors. Does their confidence in watching them from afar, whether you're working with them as a pitman or other, I mean, a guy like Bill Koch was highly successful in the business world. Did that give you was that a help? Were they mentors, or was this just one of those, I'm just going off the diving board and I'm going to take the chance?
Buddy absolutely was. I went to Buddy before we announced, and I showed him my whole business plan. He's like, sweetheart, cut in half. You're going to want to raise this much, and you're going to raise 50%. And he was absolutely right. So the good old Midwest ethics and, frugality really, really, really helped. But also it was the fact that I put myself through college, that I worked on boats. I always have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan X, which is, has been various things from working in road construction to regular construction to running a B. And I've gotten a little more older and a little more sophisticated, establishing and running a B&B in my house. I can always take care of myself.
What, America True still standing? Is it still an organization? I'm not real familiar.
It is. We're actually winding it down just because we've been running out of San Francisco since 2000. Which is when we turned it into, it's still the same organization, but when we refocused it to really just be the incubator hospital for community sailing programs and startup programs, it's not as much need now. Most cities, venues, states, clubs, sailors understand the need to do outreach into the community. So we will just be winding it down, and the rest of the funds will be merged into a scholarship fund.
Where did you run most of your junior sailing programs? Out of St. Francis, or was there another area of the bay?
No. We, first of all, we were San Francisco Yacht Club. Gotta be careful there. It's like Michigan State. But we helped Sausalito Yacht Club. India Basin is a program that is strictly community. It's down by what were the projects. Lake Merced with San Francisco State University. Alameda, Oakland. My sister still works in Oakland. She runs Rec and Park over there. But we also, in Chicago, in Fort Walton Beach, in Eastport Yacht Club in Annapolis, Lake Lanier in Atlanta, just goes on and on.
I've spent a lot of time in San Diego, but I also spent a lot of time in San Francisco. So Sausalito is probably my favorite town in America. If you can't enjoy it in downtown Sausalito, you should just go to another country. It's just a wonderful place to live.
I have a Passport 40 that's for sale that you could live aboard out there.
Is that right?
Yeah, I'm trying to sell it. I wish I could just bring it here, and I wanted to put it in Michigan, but I ended up at Oakcliff, and I got stuck here for 11 years so far and counting.
Well, about 4 or 5 years ago, I had a couple of coaches that coached for me at Michigan State that wanted to coach abroad, and one of my sailing partners in California is a superintendent of schools in Napa, and they're now both teaching at the schools in Napa and are lacrosse coaches. And the funny was that I said, when you leave, you're never coming back to Michigan. And of course, that it's turned out to be true. But it's just such a beautiful city and a great bay to sail on. Mm-hmm. So from America True, before we get into Oakcliff, I want to ask really a quick question. Behind you, I think there's a picture of Teddy Roosevelt, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And you've got a picture, as you said earlier, was Anne Frank and her sister before the war, before the First World War. I think you can tell a lot about persons' adornments on their walls. Maybe talk about the picture, because I'm just curious, and then maybe why Teddy Roosevelt?
Well, Teddy Roosevelt is, I just had to check, is because I have the Spirit of Teddy Roosevelt Award, because I don't know why I always get involved. So I joined the Chamber of Commerce board, and then I turned the tree lighting into a holiday pop-up market with entertainment and bonfires and all sorts of stuff. So that was an award. And Teddy Roosevelt's from Oyster Bay. His White House is here, so it's historic. And then the artwork is, we do, in the beginning here, our main benefactors, Betsy Lawrence is also an artist and has started an art school now. This was before, and this is one of the premier students. And she, Melgosa, I just love this. And when I found out what it was, it just shows the innocence that was there, and how, I mean, honestly, the beauty and the innocence and the nostalgia, and how much we have to keep fighting to do what's right.
Are you ambitious, or do you have a problem saying no? Or both?
Isn't that the same thing?
Well,
I do have a problem saying no, except for when it's something that I'm just totally brain dead. I can't tell you how many times to the kids, I have no more brain cells. No, go away.
I don't say that I say that as a compliment. I mean, it's just sort of that mind that works at 24,000 miles an hour, and it's hard to shut off. I get that. I tend to be, if you're a coach, you tend to be that way anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of comes with the territory, because your job is to drag people in a direction, a large group of people in a direction that sometimes they don't want to go.
Right.
So you learn the skills that, whatever skills it is you learn, if you're going to be successful at it, you sort of take it. I want you to talk a little bit about Oakcliff, because I think that's sort of the love of your life at the moment, and maybe talk through it, and maybe a little bit about it, and where it is, and what it is.
So we're in Oyster Bay, New York, which is, an hour from New York City, JFK, LaGuardia, or Islip, just across the Sound from Stamford, Connecticut, for people that are more familiar there. And it is a training and coaching center for athletes that want to progress to the next level. We started age 15, and our oldest current Eggcorn is 63. So we have all ranges and all different ambitions. Overarching, what ties it together is what I spoke of a little bit earlier: building American leaders through sailing. So yes, we want to have American Magic that has two of our graduates on the team to win the America's Cup. Yes, we want 11th Hour Racing, which is doing great things with the environment, and Mark and Charlie are graduates, and Cullen Zelenka is also working with them. We want them to win the Volvo Ocean Race. Yes, we want the Cowles twins and Stu and Dave to go and win medals at the Olympics. But if all of those things happened and they were done with individuals that weren't representing our ethics and our strive to be good, solid Americans with everything that should entail, then it wouldn't be worth it.
Is it an academy where kids can come and stay? You kind of explain what it is.
It has evolved. When I first got here, there was 36 boats, and I was supposed to organize them and make them efficient and stop getting Hunt, the original benefactor, to stop buying boats. His wife said, make Hunt stop buying boats. Now we're over 100 boats. Most of the additional ones have come from donations and not from the initial family. But we do have, and on our website, there's a really cool graphic that you can go through. We had somebody volunteer. I'm sitting in the accounting office. My desk is actually outside up on cinder blocks, so I can see everything that's going on. We have an office. We have a small retail store. We have a boat shop behind that can fit all 8 Match 40s in. It has a rigging shop, composites, hydraulics, electronics, machine shop. Upstairs, there are 8 rooms with a bunkhouse, so 43 bunk beds and a large kitchen and meeting room. We have a short walk down to a high-performance beach with containers and floating docks. Then we have a fleet of, I guess, about 35 49ers, NACRAs, FX, WASPs, NACRA 20s. We have 6 Melges 24s that we do double-handed offshore training in. We have a media department. And this sounds crazy. We have 8 staff running all of that.
many kids?
Right now we have 12 on site. And that's because we're in the fall program. And we have just this year, and we will still be taking students. With COVID, it was a crazy, like, hurry up and figure this out. We partnered with USPA, US Performance Academy, for an online school that is we're a training site for them. So it's different than just having the courses and having your mom help you, or your
Right.
coach help you. And maybe in lacrosse, they probably do work in lacrosse. They work in most sports. The difference is that we have the bunkhouse, the dorms, the learning coach on site, the
Right.
critical mass, and then we can adjust and say, okay, there's no wind right now. We're going to do class for 6 hours. Tomorrow there's going to be great wind, and we're going to not do class at all.
Unless you're in a prep school, lacrosse doesn't have that. But I would spend a lot of time at Aspen, at Ski Club Vale and then Ski Club Oakland, which are live-in academies. They have a school much like Stratton Mountain Academy. A lot of them.
Exactly.
So you go to school there. It's a full-time gig.
Mm-hmm.
And you work and live with the kids, and you get a couple of weeks off here or there. I did that in the early part of my career, and it's great. But then you just eventually get tired of hanging around kids all the time. That's not. There's one thing to coach and be around them for practice a couple hours a day. It's another thing to live with them. And that's
right. Well, I don't live on site. I have a rental house. But that's what we're finding, because in the beginning, we didn't have the high school programming. So it was all turnover. And so the path would be, okay, I'm coming as an acorn. I'm going to do a 2 to 4 week program. I'm going to come back the next summer. I'm going to be a sapling. I'll be here for the whole year. Then we would cull the top of those kids into becoming staff members, which is really a paid internship because they would break more than they would fix. And then they would become employees. And then within another year, they would go off and become a professional rigger or sailmaker or boat captain or racer. So I was really just funneling people through. Now that we're more established, we have more, because the high school academy part is just one small part of what we do. Now I have employees that are sticking around, and I'm literally struggling trying to figure out, how do I give them a good work-life balance? The best thing ever is that a couple of them have found significant others here. So I'm like, yes, I have coaches on site, but now I need to raise the funds to give them the raise so that they can not live in the bunkhouse.
Did you start this program, or was it in place and you kind of took over?
No. We created it.
Why New York?
The way it happened was, and I did not intend to run it. You're a failed consultant if you design a program and then make yourself the CEO. And I actually fought them for about 3 months until they just guilted me in and said, well, who else is going to do it? We've paid you this money to create this program, and it will fail if you don't come. Right. But anyway, so they hired me as a consultant for about a year. I did, a part-time project and came up with, this is one of the options, which is what they chose. Honestly, I don't think they thought that I was going to be able to get it to become a public nonprofit, that I was going to be able to get it to less than 50% of the main benefactor. And now his contributions are down around 30%. So we're working towards complete independence and nonprofit profitability. I do need to do some significant fundraising. We need to pivot a little bit to be able to keep the quality staff members and team members that I have that are just such good souls. And I can't pay them enough right now to keep them around.
Long Island's a great place to sail, but it's also probably the best place you can find lacrosse players. So I spent a lot of time on the island, especially in Islip and that kind of, so a lot of those places, that it's a phenomenal place for lacrosse because kids grow up with sticks in their hands, and they've been doing that for 50 years.
Yeah,
so,
well, the rumor here is that there's no wind in Long Island, but with COVID, the models have been all screwed up, and we have probably 5 knots more than any forecast, because there's not the 495 heating that stops the sea breeze coming in. So this summer has been spectacular. And in a normal summer, we just adjust our sailing. We call it a cocktail breeze instead of a sea breeze, because it comes in around 435.
Real quick question, just to use your expertise. DYRA dropped out this year because of legality in terms of junior sailing. We kind of put a program together. We ran a lot of stuff out in front of Crescent because I kind of stepped in and helped with some of the other directors just kind of move it forward when they weren't. We also spent a lot of time making sure the kids spent more time practicing than racing. And to that end, there's been a big discussion about Optimus to 420s. And my contention is, if we've got, as we do at our facility, we've got 20 420s and we've got 25 Optis, all of a sudden you're going to go out and spend a lot of money for a foil or for some kind of boat. I understand the difference between the flat end Opti And if money's not an issue, do you see a mid-range boat that from a performance perspective, or do you think it's okay to go from Optis to 420s?
I think it's okay to go from Optis to 420s. I think that what's happened, and a little bit it could be the evil capitalism marketing, where somebody's designed a boat for every increment, and the poor parents, especially the parents who have some wherewithal but no sailing experience, get taken advantage of. So if you buy an Opti and then you put a foil on that, and then you get a Club 420, and then you get an I-420, and then you get a 470, and then, oh my God, there's a 29er, and there's some FIVAs in there, and then you get a FX, and then a 49er, then you get, an Ultimate 30, and then you bought yourself an America's. I mean, come on. It's good to push people. So we have something called the Triple Crown. And next summer, we're working on the different swaths of sailing. We used to be like, this month is for high performance, this month is for match racing, and this is for offshore. And now we have the infrastructure and the coaches and the staff that I was talking about to be able to do all summer programs. Maybe it's not 12 weeks each program. So for the dinghy Olympic type program, and we're calling it a Helix, you start here in the beginning of the summer, so after Memorial Day, where we do a program that has some 29ers, has the FX, has the NACRA 17s, has the NACRA 20s, probably has the Melges 24s, and has the WASP. It's like, come, try, don't be afraid, there's no pressure, you're going to get wet, what's the big deal, right?
Right.
Then we do a 2-week, which is more the people that have already been exposed, and they say, let's do this. We bring in the outside coaches. That's proper training. Then at the end of the summer, we'll have a 2-week program where there's some competition for the kids that maybe came the first week, went home to Crescent, and they and their friends were just fighting over the 29er. They come back and they race. And then after, when the high school kids are back in school, we have the full-on Olympic level training with the Olympians. And then we have a Triple Crown prize grant regatta where you win grants to go towards your expenses to help you pay for things that are unsexy, like insurance, like coaches' fees, like travel, to go on.
Right. And the reason I asked the question is that my first year, I just watched because I was just trying to get things in the right place and have some understanding. And it was remarkable to me that 75% of the time we were racing and 25% of the time we were practicing. And in that 25%, we were also probably 50% of that time was being in a skiff of some sort, taking kids to a race. All we did was we raced,
Right.
race. I think of Sandlot. I think of the way I grew up as a kid where I lived on a lake and we sailed, but we also had a golf course and we had all these different sports. My point is that not everything when I grew up was supervised. You just went and did.
Yes.
So we created a weekend program here, and I was an idiot to start with. By the end of the summer, we kept them in a place, and we had a couple coaches and boats to make sure. But if my coach coached, I fired him because I wanted the kids to just go. And as a couple people on Facebook pointed out, there were kids that came out to learn to race. There were some kids that came out to learn to sail, and there were some kids that literally tied their boats to the dock and went swimming.
Yeah, exactly.
They weren't supervised. They just went. And they got out of the process of having to feel like they were going from 9 to 3:30, like they were at work. And I think
like they're at work and they're trying to please, and if they don't please and if they don't succeed, they're failing. And that's absolutely, when you talk about, way back we started talking about the Sea Scouts. When we did the Sea Scouts, that's the same thing. The coaches were there, the adult supervision was there just to make sure we didn't hurt ourselves. And what I didn't mention is that somebody donated the most ugly Do 427. We called it Agent Orange, and we went sailing on it overnight. Maybe it was till 10 o'clock at night. It felt like overnight, but we were allowed to go out and do our own thing and make our own decisions and push our limits and get wet if we had to, and, stub a toe if we forgot to put our shoes on. And there's a little bit of unsupervised learning. You want to have that safety net, but you don't want them to know it's there.
The reason I'm asking the questions, and I really appreciate the insight, is of all the experts that we have had this conversation, since I'm the dumbest guy in the room, I've been able to have experts like yourself and like I said, Dennis and Peter Eisler and Dave Perry and a bunch of guys almost mimic what's coming out of my mouth, and then kind of having that go back to take that to our DYRA meetings. And lo and behold, if the best guys in the world have the same opinion, then we at least have to look at it slightly different. 2 last questions. Are you still sailing internationally? Are you still doing any kind of big races?
Not in COVID, but
No. I mean, over the last few years, are you still?
yeah. Yeah, I'm still sailing a fair amount. I've been sailing as when you get older, you get a little more comfortable and you get to sail on the Perini Navis. Never say no to sailing on a Perini Navi or super yacht. This summer coming up, we should be back in Michigan because we're very grateful to the fact that Doug DeVos has donated WindQuest. So our plan is to do both Mackinacs, Harbor Springs, maybe possibly Trans-Superior, and then deliver out the St. Lawrence. So we will sail that with an executive boat captain who's David Blanchfield, Katie Pettibone's husband, our shore manager who's from Wisconsin, Alex Firefly Lulowitz, then Fritz Warner, who's from Detroit. He will be the engineer. And the fact that I mentioned him on here is he's going to call me like 20,000 times. And then about 6 to 8 saplings, trainees. And then we'll also have some of our supporters who will be making a donation and sailing along with us. But it's not pay to play. You have to have the quality, right, and then we'll go sailing. So that's pretty exciting.
If you watch our two Mackinac shows, we had a chance to do Bob Charles and Chris Duhan on Morning Star and Heartbreaker. And DeVos was right next. We were in Harbor. He was on right behind the New York Deli right there. Mm-hmm. So chance to talk to him a little bit and had a chance to look at those 52s. And then I stuck around and went out for practice afternoon. I'd never been on a 52 of that nature. Yeah. That Chris called a couple of days ago. I made a joke about I should buy one of these. And apparently there's a boat in your neck of the woods called Rio, a GP52.
Yep.
And he sent me the link to this Rio, and it's $750,000 now, but it's probably $1.5 million to campaign it. And I asked him if they would take green stamps, and he didn't even know what green stamps were, but we kind of had a joke about it. And I said, no, I said, I can ride and take pictures, but I won't be buying a 52 that I can't sleep on, because my own personal boat, I've got a 50-inch television, and I like watching TV. I'm not taking it off.
There you go. Yeah, that's one of the things that we do train boat owners as well. And I have to gently explain to them and their partner, whether it's the husband or the wife, that you're going to buy a boat you expect, just rule of thumb, to spend the same amount per year in maintenance and upkeep and expenses as you purchase the boat for, if it's a used boat.
Well, the cool part coming from the Great Lakes is that having moved to Crescent, I've sailed my whole life, but now I'm around. I mean, I've learned a ton from just being around some of the guys. Yep.
I need to point out again, the Midwest, there's something special. There's something in the water. You know, Doug DeVos and I raced against each other back in the days when I was running Leading Edge in the 50s. And he's a good quality human being. And the way that we made the connection is, you know, we've known each other forever. I see him here and there. And he was coming through New York, and he happened to pop in on a barbecue when all of our kids had just come back from racing, delivering to Marblehead, racing to Halifax, delivering back, and they were just like bubbling. And about a month later, he texted me, he goes, "Do you want WindQuest?" I was like, "Yeah." So, and the connection that wasn't planned, but just is, with good humans circling good humans. American Magic, you know, Robin Lesh is on their design team. Terry Hutchison is a mutual friend of all of ours. Sean O'Halloran is on the grinder. He's our graduate. And people say, well, they don't have an American helms person, but they are helping build the American athletes that will, hopefully, theoretically, my lips to God's ears, be filling the team when they bring the America's Cup back.
Don, I appreciate it. I was involved a little bit in the America's Cup as a publicist in the late 80s in San Diego, and unless you've been to an event or been inside the compound to understand it. And I don't understand it the way you do, but it's something. But this has been a really a terrific opportunity to talk to you, and you're a delightful woman, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Be safe. Make sure you stay out of the COVID, and have a great winter.
Thank you. It's a beautiful day here, so come visit us out in Oyster Bay as soon as it's safe.
My next recruiting trip, I will call you ahead of time and stop and say hi.
Perfect. Wonderful.
Thanks, Don.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.